Good evening.
Hi.
Welcome. We are so excited to be doing another episode tonight. We are both going with hats. You can choose which one you like best.
Cool.
So tonight we're going to be talking about money, which is, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like this is kind of a touchy subject.
Yeah, I think, it's one of those things that can be hard to talk about, even sometimes within a family, much less amongst friends or church members. It can be a difficult topic, especially I think in our society, in our culture. It's very kind of secluded. Everybody minds their own business. You don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Everybody's fine, everything's great, and for a lot of us, that's kind of how we handle things like money.
Yeah, operate is very leave our nose out of it, which we're not advocating that you start digging through somebody else's don't get the wrong idea that you start digging through somebody else's finances, but I think we are saying that maybe there are some misconceptions out there that need to be addressed and talked about.
And I think, regardless if it's money or something else, if our thoughts aren't correct on a certain area, then it's going to limit our growth.
Yes,
and if we have these beliefs or these programs like we've talked about before that are running through our minds, either based on our history, the family we grew up in, our culture, our own beliefs that we've taken on somehow, then, we're going to keep repeating those patterns and we're not going to be able to break out of them and grow. Regardless of what the subject is, money is just one of those subjects.
No, I think that's exactly right. Whether it's, with your habits in your daily life, eating, or, how you approach your career or exercise, or how you treat other people and develop relationships. I mean, there's so many different areas that I know we've talked about before. Mm-hmm. And I even think more than just even our culture or things like that, I think there's also, like, within our culture as Americans, there's the culture of the religious culture. And I know a lot of our viewers are religious people, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions within the, quote, Christian community that are rooted in how we view money.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to, sometimes that's passed down from generations upon generations. You look at, the history of the church and where things came. You could trace it back even to, our ancestors that came across from New England, and some of their beliefs kind of trickle through the ages. And so it's good to just examine why you believe a certain way about money, or, why you've heard certain things about money and how to manage money, and whether it's okay to have a lot of money or whether it's okay to not have much money. And those are just some of the things that we're going to talk about, and hopefully it'll give you guys something to think about. And of course, we'd welcome any questions, and if we say anything that you don't agree with, please, let us know as well, and we'd be happy to examine that as well.
And I think what we're really talking about here is, like, what's the difference between, like, a tradition and what the Bible says about money, or what are the facts saying versus what your friends are saying, that kind of thing. So I think that's also important to notice, the difference between those two things. And there's a lot of areas we can go into with this. I feel like for me, this is an area that I could talk about all day long. But, really digging deep into what is a tradition, or what is something that's commonly thought, versus what's the reality of it, or what does the Bible say about that thing. So let's jump in. What's a really common one that you think we could address first?
Yeah, I think, 1 Timothy 6 is a really good passage that talks about money from kind of different aspects. But one of the famous verses, if you will, that we've all heard quoted is, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. And sometimes that has been misquoted. I don't think as much now, but certainly in the past, that money is the root of all evil. And especially, maybe in popular culture, you've seen that in movies or other things. But I think that can be a misconception, that even when you have to read it several times, even in the correct context, you can translate it to say money is evil, or think that money in and of itself is bad.
Right.
So I think that's definitely a misconception that we want to touch on.
Well, and if supposing that that is true, money is evil, then how are you going to live in the world? Because you need money to have a house, and you need money to be able to feed yourself and your children, your family, to be able to have a pillow or a blanket, to have clothing. There's so many different things that money allows for us to have that aren't bad or that aren't evil. So if that was true, then how do you survive? How do you go about these things? How do you get good things done? Like we talk about charities or other things that are important to us that are causes, like supporting people who help with adoptions or who help eradicate sex trafficking or rescue people from that situation. I mean, there's so many different worthy causes, and they all take money to be able to make those things happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, what people really, we all know that you have to have some sort of money to live, to survive, to
Right.
provide for your family.
Yes.
And I think, everybody kind of understands that. So really it is, people think a certain amount of money is what's really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of gets into, well, then how much money is wrong?
Right.
And what standard are you using for that? And because as we've talked about, most Americans, if you look at on the world stage, would be considered wealthy regardless of if you make $30,000 or going up.
Right.
So then I think most people in the United States aren't really using the worldwide scale. So then you say, okay, well
Right.
then in America, then what is too much money? Is it $50,000? Is it
Right.
70? Is it 100? Is it 500? Is it $1 million?
Right.
And so, it really kind of gets out, you can get into the weeds with the perception of, well, then what is too much money, or what amount of money is wrong to have.
Right. We have, it's almost like, well, that sin's worse than this sin. Almost like in our mind, I feel like we have like levels, like, oh, well, it's bad to make this amount, but it's okay to make this amount. And even if we don't say this out loud, I think that's an important distinction. Even if like somebody came up to you and said, is it wrong to have $1 million? You might say, well, no, it's not wrong to have that. But it's important to know that based on our own, like, kind of programming our own thoughts and things that we were raised with, if we had that amount of money and we believed that money was the root of all evil, then we would find a way to quickly get rid of that money, because we would believe that we were evil by even having that, or we were engaging in something that was evil or something like that. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to say that those things are bad or say that those things are, quote, evil. But internally we can have these thoughts and these this programming that either comes from our upbringing or the people we hang around with or whatever, that perceives it, that we perceive having this amount of money or making this amount of money or whatever it is, whatever standard, having this kind of car is inherently just bad.
Yeah, agreed.
So there are verses like that talk about, like there's another one we were talking about last night in Matthew that talks about, Jesus is saying it's easier for a rich man to get through the eye of a needle than to enter the kingdom of heaven. Am I quoting that correctly? He can read it for you. It's not literally a needle like as in what we're thinking. That was something specific to their culture, but the idea remains the same. It's very difficult. But he wasn't saying that in a context, correct, where he was saying that if you are rich or you have a lot of things, automatically bad, automatically horrible. And I think we wanted to make that distinction because that's a common thing. If you have a lot, then automatically Jesus is saying here you're really bad. Well, no, he's saying you have more of a responsibility. It may be more of a temptation for you to engage in things that aren't right and get into some trouble. And but I think that's an important distinction to make there as well.
Yeah, I think when you look through the Bible and you look at the examples of what Jesus says in other passages in the Bible, it's always about the attachment to wealth that is the problem. When he talks to the rich young ruler, it's not that he was wealthy, it was that he was attached to it and valued that more than he valued following Jesus.
Absolutely.
When he talks to other people about their riches. When you have the parable of the farmer who wanted to build more barns because he had so much, it wasn't about that he had too much. It was about that he was relying on himself and his own hand to create wealth. He wasn't relying on God to take care of him, on God's blessings.
Absolutely.
So when you look at these passages, you really have to see what is it saying about, is money the bad thing, or is it the person that's obtaining it and how their attachment is to it? And so then when you get that concept, you can see that that principle applies to anything outside of money, regardless of if we're putting our trust in our health, in our education, in any other human being. Anything that we're attached to above God can become an idol and is therefore a problem. It's not specific to money.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that's a really important distinction to make. Even if you are somebody who is considered, whether in your own eyes or in the eyes of the world, poor, you can still make money an idol. You can still make it something that you worship. You can still make physical things something that you see as equaling security. So I think that whether you have a lot or you have a little bit, the temptation is still there and it's still real. And I think that's where God warns us, like, hey, you need to rely on me and not on, in one passage he talks about on mammon, and that's just referring to like things, right? Material things. And so not just money, that's one of many things.
Yeah, I mean, any of these areas, there's going to be specific temptations, whether it's too much of something or too little of something. And, in 1 Timothy, it says those who want to get rich fall into temptation of trusting in these things. So where is your desire? Is your desire just in obtaining a lot of things for the goal of having things? Or is your desire to use and be a good steward of the things that we have so you can either help people and serve people and bring glory to God?
Right, absolutely. Where is your heart set? Where are you focusing your attention? I think is huge, a huge part of what he's talking about here.
I think another misconception that kind of touches on these, but is that if somebody's wealthy, they've obtained that wealth in some dishonest manner.
Yes, I think
or
that's a huge
they were
one.
just a freeloader and they got it from their mom and dad, or they got it in some dishonest fashion. And I think we don't have the specific stats, but I know most millionaires in the United States are first generation millionaires.
Yes.
They're not third, fourth, fifth. This isn't, some countries that have nobility and the wealth is passed down through families for generations.
Right.
There are some instances, sure, but
yes.
Most people who become wealthy in the United States become wealthy because of their own hard work, their own ingenuity, their own
discipline,
building a business, discipline, the millionaire next door model. And so a lot of times when people say that, they're really it's a sign that there's probably some jealousy there, that they're wanting to put that on somebody, that, oh, well, they got it dishonestly, or they must have, if they didn't do anything, they're a trust fund kid, that's how they got their money, without really knowing that person's story or what they did and how they maybe worked hard to obtain that money.
Yeah, jealousy. I think also just misinformation. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And if you've never heard of it, Dave Ramsey did a study of millionaires. It's actually somebody on his team did, Chris Hogan, and it's like the largest study done, I think, in the US or something like that. It's really, really large. So you can always go and download that and see all the statistics, because it's crazy. It's right there. It's right there. That like a large majority of them, the millionaires, got their wealth honestly and through discipline, hard work, overtime, being smart, making good decisions, things like that. And I think too, that goes along with that I've heard talked about, that I think is important to note is, if you were going to build a business yourself, which a lot of people do in these situations, or you were going to work at a company for a really long time, or you were going to be in the workforce for a really long time, have great benefits, really build your career. Most of the time, you need to be somebody that people want to work with, right? Not get fired all the time, not have a bad reputation, something where you've really built things up. You're not, like if you have a business, for example, a huge part of that is your reputation. So like your own business, right? And so that's really important, to note that if you are being a dishonest person, it's going to make it harder for you to actually build your business or build, your reputation or your brand. because you have this history of being dishonest, if that makes sense. So yes, there are some people out there who do dishonest things and gain things that way, but the majority don't. They just are wise about how they do things. So I think that's also important to note. Well, how about some other ones that you have in mind about misconceptions? Any others come to mind?
I don't think so.
I mean, I think too, we've touched on, a certain amount of money is one of the things that I think sometimes we use is like we draw the line with a certain amount of money equals whatever. But I think when you really look at the statistics of on a global scale, everyone in the US, including homeless people, are usually better off. So that's, again, something that, we're not trying to preach at you or anything like that. Like, do research. We're saying, go out there, do some research, look at the facts. Because a lot of the time it's really amazing kind of learning about some of that and how wealthy and blessed we are in this particular country. So even on like a global scale, you're already starting to be like in a very, very like low percentile the more your income goes up in the US. Just kind of throwing that out there. So again, we may see it as a lower income or whatever, but on a global scale, we are an extremely wealthy country. So if you're living in the US, that's something to really, really think about when you start making these labels of poor and rich and divisions in your own mind.
We did have a question about what circumstances would you advise someone that they ought to make more money. I think, of course, if you're not able to provide for your own, then that's one you certainly want to take care of, where you're not having to rely on, obviously, hopefully there are circumstances where if you need help, you can get help, but you don't want that to be a long-term solution if at all possible. And then if you have something on your heart to where you want to be able to serve or give back in a bigger capacity, that does require money. I think that's also important. And then also, I don't think, it's a bad thing necessarily to want to either build something big enough that you can give a large portion to something that you are invested in, or even to leave some kind of legacy for your family down the road, or people that are counting on you to take care of them in some way. I don't think those are bad things. So I think it depends on what your goals are, that are of course within the confines and constraints of God's plan, but those things aren't bad to want to do.
So the only thing I would add, and I think those are incredible examples and things that I think about a lot, sometimes people tell me, they're like, oh, I've got plenty. I'm like, that's great. That's awesome. But something I would think about is like, who needs your extra? Who can really benefit from you? Is it, an adoption organization or a pro-life organization or something like that that's really weighing on your heart? Because a lot of the time we think, oh, we'll let somebody else take care of that, but maybe that other person is you. But the only other thing I would include in that list is just if you have debt. I really personally, my belief is that it's not wise to have debt. It's taking away from your future, and I believe the Bible teaches against debt. So that's the only thing, that if you have a lot of debt, that I would advise somebody to increase, if it's an appropriate situation, to where they could increase the amount of money that they make so that they cannot be in debt. I think that's really important, because the more debt we're in, the less we can give back.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Does that help? Hopefully that helps answer the question. So
I want to add, the other situation would be if you want to buy some more Jordan shoes, then you should make more money as well.
You can see how Matt measures money is with Jordans. So, okay. Anyways, so we'd love to hear, like, if you have any other misconceptions and speak to those. There's a lot out there. I don't think we are even touching all of them. But I think we've touched on some pretty big ones. So what are some positive things that the Bible says about money? Because one thing that can happen when we say automatically having a lot equals you're bad or you're evil or you're slimy or whatever it is, then that kind of contradicts when God says positive things about He's going to bless somebody with wealth. Or when you have examples like Abraham, who he was a very wealthy man. And he was a man who followed God even when it was really difficult, and even when he didn't know what the next step was even going to be. When he didn't know where they were going to move to, or he didn't know that he was going to provide, a ram in a bush to, replace his son, that he was a very faithful man. So, maybe speaking to some of that thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at some of the examples in the Bible, and like you mentioned, Abraham, Jacob, David, Solomon, Hezekiah, some of the other kings that were good kings in Israel and Judah. You have
and New Testament examples like Lydia and Joseph of Arimathea, and I mean, I'm sure there are others.
Yeah, you look at, God blessed a lot of those people when they obeyed what he Job was another one, he asked him to do, and part of his reward was increasing their wealth. And it would be ironic, or it would be very odd and contrary to God's nature if, especially in Job's case, after he goes through all these things,
right,
and then he doubles his wealth, and when he was already known as the wealthiest man,
right.
So why would God be giving him increased temptation and increased burden and increased opportunity to sin? That just doesn't, make sense to me. And
right.
Solomon, of course, is famously extremely wealthy. And at least at the time when he asked for God said, "What do you want?" And he said, "Wisdom." And because he asked for wisdom, he gave him prestige and honor and wealth. And I think maybe part of the reason that God gave him wealth afterwards was because he now had the wisdom to hopefully use that wealth.
To discern. Mm-hmm.
To discern. And then, the New Testament, we have the, parables that, while not all of them are specifically just related to money, the principles of the sower and principles of
the talents.
And when principles that a lot of America for its life has honored and respected, which are, if you work hard, you will reap a reward. Of course, again, those have spiritual application, but they also, I think, are natural laws to some extent.
Yeah, sure.
That are taught that when you put in work, God is going to reward you, or just the natural laws He's put in place are going to reward you.
Yeah, and we're not by any means, preaching here or speaking here in a way that is meaning that we believe that simply obeying God is going to equal a certain amount of money. But we are speaking to the natural, like you said, the natural laws that God has set up in the Bible, in the world, and what how the Lord talks about working, and He has, okay, we have our sound on, and how the Bible talks specifically about blessing people, how God will bless people. And like you said, it looks in a lot of different ways, a lot of different forms, spiritually, with relationships, with physical things, with money, with opportunities. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can be blessed, we can have abundance. And money is just one of those ways. So I think a lot of the time I think one common misconception too is just kind of like we elevate money to this. I think the temptation is always to elevate money to this like God role of security. Mm-hmm. That we put in, and it does bother me sometimes when people say like, I'm financial security, and I understand what they mean. I'm not trying to say it's wrong to ever say that. But what I think what they're meaning, hopefully in that context, is meaning more like they're set for life. They're being responsible. They're set in such a way that they could retire right now, and that would be okay, and they'd be taken care of, provided everything stayed pretty stable. But our true security is found in the Lord, and so our faith needs to be not based on the number in our bank account, our 401k, or our, Roth or whatever else, retirement accounts, properties, etc., but it needs to be found in the Lord, and that we can use this money, these wealth building tools, as resources that God has given us, just like anything else he's given us. And so putting it in that proper place, one time it was interesting, I was reading something or listening to something, and they were talking about, I think I was reading, and it was talking about money, and it was saying that money itself is not evil. It's not good, it's not evil, it's just money, right? And so we assign if it's good or bad, right? Like we put it in the bad place, we put it in the good place, or God can do that. But itself is just pieces of paper, coins. It's an inanimate object, right? And so we can put it in a bad place. We can put it to good use. And it's how we view it, it's how we use it, that becomes kind of where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's a really, really important thing to think about when it comes to how do we view money? How do we go about using it?
We had a good comment that Joseph of Arimathea was an example of somebody who was rich but used his wealth to do something amazing for God. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
a great example. And to be honest, I hadn't thought a lot about that until the past couple of days, because he's just mentioned so shortly,
right,
but had such an important role
Absolutely.
in being able to provide the tomb for Christ, which was by what we know, I'm not an expert in it, but it seems to be quite expensive. It was a new tomb, nobody laid in it before, so it was probably going to be very expensive, and he had the opportunity to do that. And I think going back to the first question, having some money gives you the opportunity for when things arise. One thing we did for the first time in 2020 was have a budget to give back more outside of what we do, our normal contribution to the church. And there's always plenty of reasons and abilities to spend that money.
Yes.
There isn't ever going to be a shortage of people needing help. And as how our country has been in the past, and how the Bible teaches, when there's a need, the family needs to take care of it first. Then
Correct.
The church or your community, and then only as a last resource should we be going, hopefully, to get government support or other support. And this having extra money allows you to be there for your family, for your church family, for your community, even your neighbors. I mean, it used to be that neighbors took care of each other. We barely know most of our neighbors anymore. And that having those extra resources gives you opportunity to serve, where if you have nothing extra, there isn't anything else to give. Exactly.
Your extra, like I said earlier, somebody may be counting on your extra and thinking about that. Like, even if you don't need it, who needs that? Like, there were tornadoes earlier this year in Nashville. A family was totally, their house and them are gone. That's it, and think about who was, there was another family that I think the father was seriously injured, and that was a whole thing. We've got COVID going on and people getting sick, and etc. We've got, there's an endless list of needs. And if we can be in a position where we can help somebody else, to me, it's like God is saying it's more blessed to give than to receive, because the giver is more blessed than the receiver, even, because you feel so good. It feels so good and rewarding and fulfilling to give, because that's how God created us. He created us in such a way that we feel good when we give, and we're like vessels for him to be able to give and to serve in such a unique way. And again, it goes beyond money, it goes beyond paper and coins, it goes to time, it goes to resources, it goes to any way that you can give and serve. But one example that Jim Rohn always gave was, if you're not willing to give $1 out of 100, what makes you think you would be willing to give, like, what was it, 100,000 or I can't remember, 10,000 out of a million or whatever it is. But that's the thing is, I don't remember the ratio there, but not a math whiz. But you get the idea. Like, if you're not willing to give that percentage, what makes you think that as your income or whatever increases, that you'd be willing to give that larger and larger amount? And that's why I think it's important to practice to start practicing giving regardless of what your income is, because that is going to teach your brain, your body, your family those principles. So I know we had a couple other things we were going to talk about. I know we're going a little bit long here, but what about the last thing is what should a Christian's attitude be about money? Or maybe we could talk about what it should be in our opinion. I don't know.
Well, I mean, all of this is our opinion.
Yeah.
If we're not quoting scripture, I think that's clear.
Yes.
You know, I think obviously looking at the examples in the Bible is important, and really making sure you have a holistic view and not just isolating one scripture and taking that as this is the one view of money. Well, that is one perspective, that is one dot that's one stroke in the whole painting, and you have to take the holistic view of what the Bible is really saying about money and wealth. But, you know, for me, I think it goes back to something that you said, is that it's a tool, and we're the one who wields it. It's like a weapon. A gun is a gun, it's a tool. It's nothing outside of the person who's wielding it.
Yes.
And it's the same with money. We're either going to use it for good or for bad. It's either going to amplify or destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to learn, is how to wield that, and
Right.
to make sure that we have the proper belief system about money to be able to wield that effectively.
Yes.
And I think, you know, again, one of the big lessons about money in the Bible is contentment.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you know, Paul, of course, has a great passage about that. I've been high and I've been low, I've been up and I've been down, but in whatever situation, I've learned to be content.
Yeah.
And he reiterates that in 1 Timothy 6 as well. But in teaching the people who, whatever circumstance they're in, to be content. And I think that's where we have to get to, because there are going to be times, most likely in life, there's been times when we've had less money and times when we've had more money.
Right.
There's ups and downs, and that's the flow of life, and that's kind of how things are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's when it goes back to making sure our certainty and our security is in God, not in money.
Yeah.
And of course, there's principles that are taught in the Bible that you hope to alleviate those ups and downs as much as possible, but
Sure.
there's still going to be things that ebb and flow, and we have to learn that whatever the situation is, to be content through those.
Absolutely. Yes. Be content. And I think kind of going along that same line is, and I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, is regardless of what it is in our lives, it's tempting to put our security or our sense of if everything is okay on that thing, or if that thing is going well. And again, we can do everything we can to be wise with our money and to be good stewards of our things and our health and all the things, but it's up to our commitment to trusting in the Lord no matter what. I think that's so key. And we did have another question.
Well,
what are good ways? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I do want to mention, I do think it's important too that if you've chosen a certain profession, or if you have a business, it's just, some people are going to make more money than others. And
Sure.
so don't feel shame if you have more money than a certain person or your peers or the family you grew up in. There should be no shame associated with money that is made honestly and through hard work. It is a blessing. It's a blessing from God if you have money.
Yes.
Every good and perfect gift is from God. He isn't cursing you by giving you money. Now, are there going to be temptations? Probably. But that's a blessing that God is giving you.
And a responsibility.
And a responsibility that he expects you to use in an appropriate manner. But there should be no shame or guilt associated with blessings that God gives us.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's sad that would be something that some people would feel, but I know that it is. And so please, if that's the situation you're in now or in the future, don't feel bad or guilty about being blessed with good choices that you've made, or just because God has blessed you for whatever reason. That shouldn't be something to feel bad about. That is really the devil trying to take that blessing from you.
Absolutely. Take our contentment away and our peace. That's nothing that God's about. And I think, again, it's a responsibility, Just like if you have $5, you have $5 million, it's a responsibility. How are you going to use it? Are you going to use it to glorify him? Are you going to take care of your family? Are you going to help take care of others? I think we have the same opportunity regardless of how much money it is. Again, we put those definitions and those benchmarks on it ourselves. And that kind of leads into our question of, what are some good ways to find people who need help? And there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. Obviously, you can ask around and see, are there needs in your community or in your church, or et cetera. And sometimes people don't like to share that they're in need or they need help. But I think that's where, especially if it's somebody in your church or your community, it's important to build relationship. Because then if you have a good relationship with them, then they're going to feel more comfortable saying, hey, you know what, this is what I need. If you're listening right, they'll say what they need. They may not ask for it, but they may say, yeah, I'm really, when so-and-so dropped this meal off, it meant the world to me. Okay, I know I can bless them by taking a meal to them. Or whatever it is. It can be something little, it can be something big. And it could be somebody who is in dire straits. It could be somebody who's not. It could be somebody that, they have money and they have what they need, like basic things taken care of, food, shelter, etc. But maybe they just need somebody to talk to, or maybe they just had a baby and having somebody bring over a warm meal is like a huge deal, So I think the more that we develop relationship and community, we can hear those needs better, and we can think about what somebody might need. I think too, another way I've done this is, for example, with children, with somebody who's a new mom or whatever, they just had a baby. I've never been in that situation. So what I did is I asked another mom. I said, hey, I'm bringing a meal to this new mom, or this mom, she was having her second baby. What would you want in a meal? So maybe ask somebody who is in a situation like that or has been in the past. Also, there's tons of ways that you can look up online. I think another thing I've noticed is find something you're passionate about. I'm really passionate about sex trafficking and helping rescue people from that situation and things like that. Also pro-life organizations. So find something that you're passionate about that you can help dive into, research, find out what they're about, what's their standard, etc. And then, make a decision either, if it's just you or with your spouse about, okay, what are we going to commit to and how are we going to help? So what are some suggestions that you have?
Yeah, I was going to say the passionate thing. There's so many people that are in need, or organizations. If you've already taken care of your family and your immediate circle, then I would say the first thing, is making sure that it's budgeted every month, that you have access resources, because maybe there is a month when there isn't a big need or need that you're passionate about, and so then you'll have double the next month. So really, like Megan said, finding something that you feel that is gonna, if you wouldn't look at it selfishly, I wouldn't call it selfishly, but in a way that's selfishly going to benefit you, that you're going to feel more tied to and emotionally connected to, then find an organization or a group that is dedicated to that. And there may be the opportunity not just to give money, but give time or give your expertise in that group, depending on what it is, to where you're not just giving resources money-wise, but resources with your experience and your time and your care and your love. And so that can be something, again, that you're benefiting not just others, but yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to want to share, and you're going to want to spend your time with, and things like that. There's so many organizations, or so many things. You could even create your own. So there's a lot of needs out there. I think it's just a matter of listening, seeking it out, praying about it, and you'll find those places to fill the needs. So I feel like we could keep going all night, honestly, but we really appreciate, first of all, the questions and your feedback and your engagement. We really, on Instagram as well, we really, really appreciate it. And we really believe that this is an important topic, and we could really talk about it on and on. There's so much that we really could say about this particular subject. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please let us know if you have any other questions, or like Matt said, if you disagree, or you have another point of view, we would love to hear from you. But as usual, please follow us on Instagram at No More Somedays with a Z. And you can always email us no more somedays with a Z at gmail.com, or you can look us up, follow us or subscribe and share and all the things on YouTube. And it's just No More Sundays, spelled normally. So I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And again, we really, really appreciate you guys tuning in.
Thanks, guys.